Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me typically would be Michael Becker, but he is on another due diligence assignment. He is actually closing 4 transactions right now, so he is heads down. And we wish Mike and his group at SPI a lot of luck. In the podcast today, we have James Eng, also with Old Capital. James, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate that.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
What's going on in the Old Capital world these days?
A couple things. I think the main thing is we just finished up our webinar 202, so sort of your advanced financing topic. So a lot of things fit in the Fannie Mae box, but sometimes when it doesn't fit or you want a slight variation, understanding how to go about that process is very key. So whether it's assumptions, supplementals, green financing, prepayment penalties, that's what we just covered in webinar 202. So if you didn't catch that webinar, you can catch the recording at oldcapitalpodcast.com.
Would you recommend somebody to look at the webinar you did 101 before they hit the 202?
Yeah, start with 101. That gives you sort of the foundation on, recourse, non-recourse financing, and just really gives you the lay of the land sort of on the loan front on multifamily. And then once you've listened to that, then move over and watch 202.
Yeah, if you're making the transition from single family to multifamily, the webinar that James did, I think last month or so, I think they had 350 people on that webinar. It has been recorded, and you definitely want to watch that. And so then you want to transition over to the 202. So 101 first, 202 now, and you definitely want to listen to him. So great. What else?
And then also September 13th, we are having our big once-a-year annual conference, so Old Capital Conference at the AT&T Stadium. So if you have not registered for that, I think the prices will go up soon. So jump on to oldcapitalpodcast.com and register for that event.
Some groups have seminars that are really not in the business. This one, everyone that's going to be there up on stage, they're definitely in the business. You want to get to know the listing agents. You want to get to know the lenders. You want to get to know some of the deal sponsors. You want to figure out how these transactions are put together. You're going to be talking to, if you attend the Old Capital Multifamily Summit, you want to really meet the decision makers. So it is a great time to go out and network. And again, we're going to have Roger Staubach, who was the famed Dallas Cowboys. We're going to do it at AT&T Stadium. Go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com website and register for that. oldcapitalpodcast.com website, and we want to see you there. Anything else?
That is it for now on the Old Capital front.
So this seminar is something to go see, so we're looking forward to everybody being at the conference. So let's talk a little bit about coaching and counseling with James Eng. We had a podcast back about a month ago or so, and we had a lot of great feedback, and we kind of want to tap James's brain again. And so let's talk a little bit about coaching and counseling. So Michael Becker says multifamily investing is completely unfair business. In the beginning, when you're starting out in multifamily, no one is going to come to your house and no one's going to come to your office to give you a deal. No one's going to come to your house. No one's going to go to your office to meet an equity investor. No one's going to go to your office. No one's going to come to your house to educate or mentor you. You must spend the effort. You must expend the energy to meet new listing agents or new equity investors, educators or mentors, or new bankers, engineers, management companies. If you are new to the multifamily business, you must do the right things to get your name out there. You need a network. You need to build your team. So in coaching and counseling today, we're talking a little bit about that. We're talking about networking and getting to know these folks. So James, who does a great job networking, let's kind of talk a little bit about where we want to go with this conversation.
Yeah, so I really wanted to break it up into 2 parts. Number 1 is the types of multifamily events, and then number 2 is why attend these live events and sort of the benefit of attending these. So let's start with the types of multifamily events. So really, I broke it down into three main types. So number one is meetups. Number two, sort of your education, seminars, mentoring clubs. And then number three are just your general conferences. So let's start with the meetups. So on meetups, typically this could be anywhere from 10 to 50 people. And these are typically free to attend. But as they say, the quality of the attendees might not be that high. So attendance is typically based on the host or the speaker. And so the higher quality events that I have either put on or seen other people put on have personal invites. So a lot of these events that are just on meetup.com, I've attended some of them. And when it's open to the general public, you get really the general public, the good and the bad. And so it's difficult to build consistency at a lot of these events with attendees unless you regularly attend. And so you really want to figure out in your city who puts on the best events. And then also really you can determine a lot by the speakers. So who are the speakers that are coming to that type of event? That's going to determine, the quality of the content that you're going to see, but then also the quality of the attendees. And so Old Capital does a couple of these sort of free events. Number one, we do lunches on a monthly basis. So these monthly lunches are typically with people that we do business with. So we might have maybe a listing broker or property manager. And this is typically in a more casual environment. So it'll be more like a lunch and learn. So they'll get up and talk for 15 or 20 minutes and then take Q&A for 10 minutes. But I like these lunches because you can get some food, but then also get to know these brokers before you're in the heat of a stressful situation, like a best and final, or even once you're under contract, negotiating the fine details of a contract. And so getting to know these folks before the actual deal always helps, and they get to know you. And so coming out to these lunches is a great way, even if you haven't bought a deal or even if you do have a deal, so that they get to know you is a key component. That's what I would say on the meetups, but then also the Old Capital Speaker Series, which we have once a quarter. So these larger events might have 300 or 400 people at these events. So typically we'll have either, somebody from CoStar or RealPage or one of the larger data providers to give a market update on DFW in Texas. And so at these events, you can also meet a lot of investors at these types of events.
Some great stuff. I think the meetups are fairly easy, fairly cheap. They may have it at a restaurant in the back room, and you may buy your own lunch, but it's a good opportunity to network with people on that platform. So I like it.
Yeah. And then also, just the past couple months, we've started a similar investor network out in San Jose. And so that's another great place to meet and, definitely help out the host by, purchasing some food or drink at these events is always helpful and helps them, continue to put on these types of events. So that's number one, the meetups. Number two is really the educational seminar and mentoring space. So a lot of these clubs will put on an event. They might start with a free introductory class. It might be 2 hours. It might be 2 days. And the entry cost is typically pretty low. So it might be $300, $400, $500 for you to go to their free workshop at first, and then also to their 2-day class. And so a lot of people will join these clubs and start to learn really the why of multifamily investing. So you'll learn the basics of NOI, cap rate, how to analyze these properties. But then the magic in a lot of these groups is the ability to not only partner with other people. So a lot of these groups are buying deals that are 10, 15, $20 million, and you do not have that capability on your own typically. And so the ability to partner and also raise the equity is a key component in these educational mentoring groups. And so the hook typically at the end of these groups is that you might have paid $500 for your ticket to their 2-day seminar, but at the end of the event, there's typically a upsell to maybe a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 membership?
I really like and think some of these educational groups are excellent. And as you know, we support a few of the very best education and mentoring platforms. They can bring a ton of value of added support to your transaction. You really don't want to do this by yourself. There's just too many icebergs out there that you may hit. The mentor can speed up your knowledge level. This is specific education on a subject. Think of it as an instructor pilot to fly an airplane. You pay them a fee, you learn, and then you implement their teaching. You may have to go through many exercises on how to fly a plane, but their value is how to recover from a potential crash. So possibly the instructor has learned the hard way. They teach you what they have been through in the past, thus saving you time and money. And sometimes one little mistake, not obvious to you, but obvious to the mentor, it can cost you a lot of money, more than what the education and mentor group will charge. So as a lender, I also like the students that have been trained through these education and mentoring groups because they're usually the best qualified and the most knowledgeable on how the transaction will flow. They help set expectations correctly.
And then, I like to, a lot of the groups will not really advertise the price of their higher level or personal mentoring. I like to tell people right up front, that's the price, so they're not surprised. And it seems like a big price, but then once you start looking at larger transactions of $5, $10, $15 million, one small mistake will cost you 2, 3, 4 times that amount very easily. And so while these groups, it sounds expensive, but you get your money back very quickly.
One thing I probably forgot to talk about is under the multifamily events is another idea. And I want to give you just one more idea how to do it. Some self-directed IRA companies have weekly or quarterly investment conferences. These could be investor mixers that are done after work that brings many self-directed IRA investors together. This could be an excellent opportunity to fish in a pond that's loaded with money. Some of these self-directed companies are flush with cash, and that cash has not been invested into commercial real estate. So you want to start to build a substantial list of different relationships for future transactions. So get their email addresses, get them on your list, and you want to drip on them over a period of time and slowly build the relationship. And so also these meetups and networking events, and going to these self-directed IRA things, it's really where the rubber meets the road. And so do you know what attracts capital? Do you really know why folks invest in apartments? Or better, what are investors trying to obtain? Is it the highest yield? Is it the IRR? Is it a cash on cash? Is it the best quality of the asset itself? So when you attend these live events, you're getting some great market data. You're finding out what the other sponsors are seeing out there when you're competing for investors' dollars. What's the most difficult property to buy these days in the apartment market? I think it's the workforce housing, B-, C+ transaction. It's the value-added property in the urban or the suburban areas. It's one that you can buy it at X, rehab it, stabilize it, and sell it for Y. And the difference between the X and the Y these days is huge. So great capital gain for you and your partners. You are really turning around a property, turning around the neighborhood, and everyone is looking for that deal. In the last 8 or 9 years, a lot of the value-added transaction properties have been completed. Some properties have been bought or sold 3 or 4 times in the last 8 or 9 years. So every time the value has gone up because of the increase of NOI and the decrease in cap rates. Today, those transactions are still around, but the volume or the number of the transactions has gone down. In Dallas, we're seeing 30 to 40 offers coming in on a hot purchase. So my question is, what's next? What really is next? What should we be focusing on next? What will still attract capital in the future? What will capital look for? Older properties like some of the B and C properties that keep getting older, where one-time capital replacements start becoming monthly or annual replacements. Some of these buildings were built in the 1950s and 1960s with old technology. Should you start to adjust your criteria on what you should be buying? Perhaps higher quality assets that perhaps lower yields? It's only when you're able to speak with investors can you change the perception of the market and then have them focus on higher quality assets with slightly lower returns. So setting the expectations correctly, I think that's a big thing in some of these meetups and just talking about what some of the changes are. So you go there as a sounding board to where the market is going. Anything else?
Yeah, a lot of these. So we talked about meetups, sort of your education seminar space. But then the last thing we wanted to touch on in sort of types of events is really conferences. And so these conferences that are put on typically by larger groups such as BizNow or Crittenden, these events typically are focused on your Class A properties and new development. And so a lot of these groups are sort of your corporate employees for pension funds and hedge funds. But what we tried last year, and I think worked pretty well, was our conference on BNC. And, a lot of conferences talk about the why of apartment investing. I think the main differentiator is that our conference focused on the who as well. So the people that are actually doing the transactions in DFW, in Texas, the listing brokers, the property managers, the guys sort of boots on the ground here in Texas that are actually putting the deals together. And so that's what I think differentiates our conference from a lot of conferences, is that a lot of conferences are, whoever pays the most shows up on the panel. And so our speakers are determined by who actually does the most. And so I think that what is differentiates our conference compared to a lot of others.
So we're not going to help you underwrite transactions. We're not going to talk a little bit about cap rates and how you figure out cap rates or valuation on properties. What are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about actual transactions that people are doing. And so, for example, the 4 listing brokers that we're going to have on our panel are the 4 guys that do, probably 80% of the BNC multifamily here in DFW. And so you get it straight from the horse's mouth on what's actually happening in today's market at that time and what's actually winning transactions.
So they're doing the business, and you want to know the people who are doing the business, not the person who's just spent the $2,500 or $4,000 to get up on stage. So our people who are coming to our event want to know the deal makers, and we definitely have the deal makers. And so we have up to the minute information on where the market is right now.
And so we've covered meetups, we've covered education seminars, and in conferences. Those are sort of your 3 big buckets to me on, live events. And the second part of our conversation, I really want to talk about why you should attend these live events. And there's many different reasons, but I'll start out with networking. So the job of a general partner is really to find deals and raise equity. And that is a continual job and constant job. And so attending these conferences allows you to build the relationship. So at our conference, the listing brokers are there, but not only the listing brokers, but the property managers, other general partners, and then also limited partners. And so having access to these speakers is key because you not only get to know the content, but then also get to know them personally. So, a lot of the conferences that I've been to, the challenge is the speaker will speak. There might be 3 or 4 speakers, but then there's 500-600 people. So one of the things that we're going to do at our conference is also build in time for you to sit down at tables with the speakers. And so having a networking time specific for the speakers, specific for the people that you came to meet, is part of the time that we're going to build into the conference, because I feel like at a lot of conferences, it's hard, number one, to know who's in the room and who else you need to meet while you're there. And so that, I think, is a key component, is not only hearing the content, but also meeting them face to face.
Are we going to have, like we had last year, that Whova app? And tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so we'll have an app that will allow you to, number one, see all the participants, all the speakers, and then also allow you to connect with them beforehand. So before the conference, and also set up times to meet with them and message them. And that'll allow interaction between participants, whereas a lot of conferences sort of hold that in the back. We're going to bring that right to the front.
And can other people talk with each other? If you're a general partner who wants to talk with a bunch of limited partners, or limited partners wants to talk with a general partner?
Absolutely. So as you build your profile on these apps, it allows you to sort of say what your background is, but then also what you're looking for. And so to start connecting with those other folks that you need to build your team. So whether it's property managers or vendors or limited partners, you have to start building influence and also rapport with sort of these other folks in the room. And that's great that you signed up for the event. But while you're there, you need to shake hands and start, building that network. And so, if you go there and don't get out and meet the other people in the room, then your money might have been wasted. So definitely leverage the app. But then once you're at the conference, you have to be ready. That's a little bit of a warm up to get in the game. So it's a full day event at AT&T Stadium. So definitely be ready for that.
So education is a big thing too. James, tell us a little bit about the education.
So there's a lot of stuff that you can read, market reports, and typically those reports come out on a quarterly basis. And so it is very different reading about something than speaking with an investor about a specific topic. So when you go and talk to the speakers about their transactions and what's happening on those deals for buyers to win those transactions is very different than reading a Marcus & Millichap report that came out, 2 months ago about what's happening in Dallas, right? You need to know what's happening now and how you're going to win your next transaction. And also when you're talking to general partners about whether it was how they acquired the deal, but then also once they bought the deal, how they managed the deal, who they use for their CapEx, rehab budget, and then how do they communicate with investors? All those things that aren't really in a book, those are the things that you can learn from other general partners and other speakers. So one of the panels that we're going to have after lunch is really around general partners and their best practices. So how they go about whether it's raising capital, investing from California, building a community at these apartments, and then really getting in the game on, whether you have a full-time job in whether it's the Army, Navy, or corporate job, how do you transition from a full-time job into multifamily? And how do you start building that network so that it is achievable? Those are the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of sharpening the saw. It's not just the specific things about submarkets, but then also the tactics and how do you actually grow your business as a multifamily investor.
How about any new tools, new technology that's coming out to help ownership groups?
So there'll be a couple vendors there that will be talking about not only property management, but then also the tools that, whether it's, saving water on your property to qualify for the green program, or even managing your investors. So a lot of groups, when they do a syndication, might do a lot of stuff on paper and have to track everything by hand. But there's a lot of tools and services out there that allow you to manage subscription agreements, manage your limited partners, and help you sort of push out K1s on a more electronic basis. And so getting to know sort of what tools are available out there so that as you start to scale your business, it becomes easier and easier. So similar to, when you only have 10 units, it's pretty hard to get third-party property management. But when you have 300, 400, 500 units, it becomes easier and easier. And so learning about those tools and tactics is a key piece. And so you'll get to meet those folks at the conference as well.
And one of the things that we're also going to have at the conference is we're going to have one of the top economists or the top economists with Fannie Mae that's coming in. So she is going to speak, and you want to get to see her, maybe get her picture with you. She's going to talk a little bit about what the market is, just like Wayne Gretzky. Follow where the puck is going, not where it is right now. She's going to talk a little bit about where it's going to. So get her picture with you, and then when you go back to your meetups or when you start talking with some of the other investors that you are trying to groom to be in your deal, that you had a conversation with the gal who runs the capital markets for Fannie Mae. Imagine what that's going to do.
And at a lot of these things, it's not just about you as a participant, right? So you want to be seen as an expert. So whether you're speaking at a conference or a meetup, it gives you instant credibility. And instead of just maybe the 3 or 4 people sitting at your table, they might get to know you, but everyone attending the event knows who you are and what you're focused on. So the top listing brokers, lenders, GPs speak at our conference. So last year we actually had multiple GPs speak at our conference and talk about deals they had gone full cycle on. And this is very educational for the people in the audience, but then it also gave them a spotlight for future deals. So we actually had the seller of a potential deal was in the audience, and they became more comfortable with a lead investor after seeing them present at our conference. And so this gives you an opportunity, a lot of times these conferences and meetups, to tell about the deals that you've owned, purchased, rehabbed, sold, and improved these communities. But then also remember who's in the audience. And, in our last session, we talked about differentiating yourself. There might be 3 people all within 25,000 on a deal. How's the seller going to choose the one buyer, right? So there's only one buyer and a lot of second place trophies. So having that exposure a lot of times gives you that slight edge where the seller might have seen you present somewhere and sort of gotten a good vibe from you. And that might be the small difference between first place and second place.
Second place gets those participation trophies. There's only one first place winner in these deals, and we're helping you try to become that first place winner. This conference is really not for the basics of multifamily. This is for, if you're going to use 101, this is the 201 or 301 educational piece. We would hope that you kind of already know what the 101 piece is.
And so when we were thinking about where to host this conference, we could have put it at another conference center or another hotel, but we really wanted you to get a feel for the theme of the conference. So the theme this year is Get in the Game. And so we picked the biggest game that is played in Texas, which is football, and picked the biggest stadium, I think, in the US, or one of the biggest. And so the ability to, typically I think it's $20 or $30 just to get in the front door of this place, just to walk around it. It's so amazing. So a lot of times conferences get you outside of just your normal day-to-day. And so the ability to learn in a new space. And my monitor is pretty big, but I think we got a pretty big monitor at AT&T Stadium for you to learn and watch and really participate in this conference. So real estate can sometimes be a lonely journey, especially after losing a couple best in finals. Conferences really give you a chance to reconnect with a lot of people and learn in a new space. And so, one of the things that I like is this conference is on a Thursday. So Thursday, September 13th. But then also on Friday, we're also going to have all the listing brokers who are speaking have an open house. And so this is a chance for you to go to the offices of these listing brokers. So they're going to open up either their conference room or host networking sessions in the morning on Friday, September 14th for you. And so last year we had, 50 to 75 people at each one of these listing brokers events in the morning. And this definitely gives you a different perspective. You see where Nick Fluellen or Al Silva or Jacob Anderson, where these guys sort of do their day-to-day work and get to know them on a more personal basis. And so take advantage of that opportunity. I don't know many people who have gotten to do that. And so they're setting aside the time for our participants to really get to know them. And so definitely take advantage of the change of scenery and go and meet them. And then also in the afternoon on Friday, we're going to have an afternoon session with Jillian Sidoti, who is one of the key. She works with Gene Trowbridge on the ability to raise money legally and follow all the SEC rules and regulations in this syndication arena. So definitely those two events are typically a couple $100 just to get into those things. But for the people who come to our conference on Thursday, those will be some bonus sessions on Friday.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Jillian speak or Gene speak, you're missing something, because they'll definitely keep you out of jail and be able to raise equity the right way, the legal way, and you definitely want to spend some time with them.
And then the last couple of things I want to talk about is really content, and then the energy of sort of network of the like-minded individuals at these events. And so in terms of content, I mean, in today's world, it seems like people need that constant information, constant content. And so whether you are constantly keeping in front of your investors and your equity groups, but coming to conferences like this, you will not only, get to know speakers and get the education piece, but then also bring them back content. I mean, it's amazing that, I might be one of 500 people that go to a conference, and after the conference, not one person writes anything about the conference. Like, nobody writes it up. It's not covered anywhere. So when you go to these conferences, it's always good to maybe take, maybe what's your takeaways, right? What's your top 5 things that you learned? I was at a conference earlier this year, and I went around and just asked people sort of what was the one thing that before today you learned at this conference. And so you should have at least one, if not 2 or 3 takeaways from every conference that you go to. And I like what Seth Godin says. He's like, if you have to write something down, it forces you to think. And so think about if you had to put something out the day after your conference, what would you write on there? And then you automatically start noticing more and more things while you're at the conference, and you pay more attention at every panel.
That's interesting.
So in terms of thinking about content that you can bring back, so whether you manage your own properties or you have investors or partners, think about the information that you can not only absorb yourself, but then how can you share that with your property manager to make her a better property manager or him a better property manager? Or what information can you share with your limited partners about a submarket or about something that you learned at the conference? And I mean, I think that sets you apart as a general partner, right? So your ability to take information that you learned at the conference and disseminate that through your organization, whether that's just a couple people or hundreds of people, is a key. To me, that's a key factor for the general partners that do well in this business.
So what's the cost of the event?
So this event, I think, is right now about $325, and it'll go up probably $25 to $50 a month. And so as we get closer and closer to the event, it will become more expensive just from a planning perspective. So if you have not registered for the event, you could go to oldcapitalpodcast.com, oldcapitalpodcast.com. And on the right-hand side, there's a link to register for the event.
So conferences are an investment in yourself. They combine networking, education, and fun in one event. You want to be the person that is in the game. Get in the game. And this is what we feel is probably the best B&C networking, multifamily, workforce housing conference in the United States. It's in the center of the country. It is at AT&T Stadium. I can't think of a better venue to be at. The stadium is open. Like, we were thinking about doing it in a ballroom, but once we close the ballroom, that ballroom interior looks like it is in Des Moines versus how it looks in Seattle, what it looks in Jacksboro. So everything looks the same, but at AT&T Stadium, it definitely will stand out. Again, we're going to have Roger Staubach speak about commercial real estate. Again, when he was playing football for the Dallas Cowboys, he started a commercial real estate firm. We're going to talk a little bit about what some of his goals were when he was playing football and what he was able to do. So very exciting to listen to him too. What else?
So, I mean, very rarely do you get to be around so many like-minded investors who are focused on building wealth through multifamily investing. And so at this conference, you'll be surrounded them for, 1-2 days. And so seeing others succeed will also give you the energy to really get out there and get in the game on this multifamily investing.
So join us at the next Old Capital Multifamily Conference on September 13th and 14th. You can register at oldcapitalpodcast.com, oldcapitalpodcast.com. Anything else, James?
That's it. Thanks a lot, Paul.
So again, a little coaching and counseling with James Eng. I always enjoy these segments. Kind of a new segment started last month, and we'll start to have these out here every other month or so to listen to some insight from James Eng. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. That was James Eng. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.